Chapter 20. The Disasterous Flood. The year was 1937. Although Billy Paul and Sharon Rose recovered quickly from their colds, Hope's pneumonia clung on stubbornly. She spent the month of January flat on her back at her mother's house, unable to do anything for herself. Bill took care of his children after work, but during the day he had to leave them with a babysitter. He hired Meta Broy. Meta was almost 18 now. She had graduated from high school last May and had not yet found a full-time job, so this was a good way for her to earn some money and help her pastor at the same time. In the last half of January 1937, a storm front moved into the northeastern part of the United States. For 2 weeks, rain pelted the vast area west of the Appalachian Mountains drained by the Ohio River. Every day the Ohio River inched higher up the sides of the levees protecting Jeffersonville and Louisville, and still the rains fell, sometimes as snow, but more often as sleet. Men patrolled the dikes constantly. If one ruptured, hundreds of miles of farmland would be flooded, as well as the low-lying portions of all the riverside towns in the area. The levees were built well, but they were only dirt. They could not endure such high waters for an extended amount of time. Day by day the dikes weakened. Finally there came an hour in mid-February when civil authorities decided to evacuate everyone living in the danger zones. All that day the roads were filled with people moving to higher ground. Bill's house and Mrs. Brumbach's house were both situated in one of the threatened areas, so Bill had to find some place to take his wife. First he checked with the regular hospitals. Unfortunately, they were all full. That meant he had to move his wife and children to a temporary hospital set up by the government. Then he joined the civil evacuation effort. Despite ample warning, some people still lingered in their homes, often because they did not have the means to travel. Volunteers worked feverishly into the night trying to find such people and get them out before it was too late. Around midnight, a portion of the levee on the Indiana side of the river finally gave away, sending a massive wall of water crushing into downtown Jeffersonville. Every siren in the city screamed one last urgent warning. The worst had come. Bill was on the other side of town at the time, patrolling with his public service company truck. He had his boat in the back, just in case it was needed. A call came through in his radio. "Bill, she's broken through on our side. Hurry up and get over to Chestnut Street with your boat. We're going to need your help." When Bill got to the radioed location, several men pointed across the turbulent waters that swirled around and between houses. "There's a mother and a bunch of children stranded out there. We can't get to them. Do you think you could reach them with your motorboat?" Staring into the sleet and gloom, Bill could make out a figure standing on the porch of a house near where the dike had broken. The torrent was gushing through that hole in the flood wall, and the house was shaking violently from the onslaught of water. Over the noise of the wind and the rumbling of the floodwater, Bill could faintly hear the woman screaming for help. The current looked wicked. "I'll do all I can. Help me get my boat in the water." Starting his engine, Bill tried to head straight for the stranded woman, but the current was too strong and kept pushing him off course. So he pointed the bow of his craft upstream and fought his way toward the source of the flood. His little motor and propeller struggled to make headway. When he got as close as he dared to the collapsed levee, he swung his boat around and sped crosswise to the current, which carried him diagonally toward his goal. He crashed against the side of the house and quickly secured his boat to one of the porch posts. The mother had fainted. She looked so pitiful sprawled on the icy porch with sleet plastering her hair to her head and her clothing to her skin. Behind her, 2 little girls huddled just inside the open doorway, terrified. Bill managed to get all 3 of them off the slippery porch and into his bobbing boat without mishap. He pointed his boat directly towards the high ground where his truck was parked, but the powerful current forced him to land nearly a mile down from where he started. A group of rescue workers helped the children from the boat first. When they lifted the unconscious mother out, she revived and screamed hysterically, "My baby! My baby! Oh, don't leave my baby!" Startled, Bill looked at the 2 little girls he'd rescued. The youngest was at least 2 years old. Panic chilled him deeper than the sleet pounding his face. He hadn't checked inside the house. He must have left a small baby inside that doomed building. Bill hollered to the other rescue workers, "I'll go back and get her baby." The men nodded. Bill spun his boat around and fought his way back upstream to the broken flood wall. By the time he reached his objective, part of the porch was already gone, and the rest of the house looked like it would soon follow. Bill lashed his boat to one of the remaining porch posts and ran into the house, frantically searching from room to room. There was no baby. What could that mean? Then he realized the mother had been unconscious through the whole rescue. She didn't know her 2 little girls were safe. She must have been referring to her youngest daughter when she screamed, "My baby." Around him the house groaned as it twisted to death. Plaster fell from the ceiling like rain and burst from the walls like popcorn. A loud crack echoed down the hall. The floor jerked as the house shifted, sending Bill crashing against the closet door. Another crack sounded close behind the first, along with the noise of the splintering wood. The building was being ripped from its foundation. Running down the hallway, Bill plunged through the front door, not knowing that the porch had just separated completely from the house. He landed in icy water. By the grace of God, he managed to grab the edge of the porch as the waves carried it away. Dragging himself out of the water, he clambered over the helter-skelter boards to his boat. With numb fingers, he undid the slipknot. Moments later, the house wrenched free from its foundation and flushed away into the night. Bill knew he was not out of danger yet. The motor had died while he was searching the house, and now his puny craft was being swept uncontrollably along through the flooded streets. At any moment he could be capsized by a wave or by the branch of a tree. Bill grabbed the pull rope coated with ice and fitted its knotted end into the notch on the motor's flywheel. He pulled hard. Nothing happened. He pulled again. Still nothing. He choked the carburetor and pulled again. Still it wouldn't start. By now the engine was flooded. Over and over Bill yanked on that starter rope until his weary muscles begged for a rest. The engine refused to fire. Meanwhile, the current had carried him over to Market Street, then through another hole in the flood wall out into the Ohio River itself. Terror renewed Bill's energy. Just minutes below him thundered the Ohio Falls. 15-foot waves billowed around him. Bill struggled to keep his balance as he fought with that stubborn motor. Between pulls, it seemed like he could hear a voice say to him, "Now what do you think about your decision not to go out among that bunch of Pentecostal people?" Bill jerked again on the starter cord. Nothing happened. He could hear the Ohio Falls roaring ahead of him. Kneeling in the icy water that sloshed around the bottom of his boat, Bill interlocked his freezing fingers and prayed desperately. "Lord, I've got a sick wife and 2 sick babies lying there in a hospital. In just a few more minutes, I'll sink beneath those falls. Oh, Lord, please help me. I don't want to die here on the river and leave my family helpless." A divergent thought interrupted his prayer. It seemed like he could hear his mother-in-law saying, "Trash. They're nothing but trash. I'll never give you permission to drag my daughter out amongst backwash like that." Trembling with guilt, Bill prayed, "Dear God, I know I've done wrong. Please forgive me. Jesus, please have mercy on me. Please start this motor." The falls roared louder by the minute. Standing up, Bill pulled again on the starter rope. This time the motor sputtered, coughed twice, then took off. Bill turned his boat around and gave it all the gas he could. Slowly he gained distance against the current until finally he was far enough away from the falls that he could safely point his bow towards the Indiana shore. He landed near Howard's Park, miles from where he started, almost to New Albany. Lashing his boat to a tree, he walked back towards Jeffersonville. It was early in the morning when he finally slid his weary body behind the steering wheel of his service truck. Immediately he set off to see his wife and children, but he had to detour when he found the way blocked by the flood. He tried a different route. It too was blocked. After nearly an hour of frustrated attempts, Bill realized that every road heading in that direction was impassable. Suddenly, a new wave of terror poured into his heart. Could the government hospital be underwater? He raced to the government offices and found a friend of his, Major Weekly. "Major, is the hospital washed away?" "Billy, there's over 20 feet of water down in that area. Did you have anyone in there?" "Yes, a sick wife and 2 sick babies." "Don't worry, everyone got out. They put them all on a train and shipped them up north to Charleston." "Not very fancy, I'm afraid. All they had available were cattle cars." Someone else said, "I heard that train washed off the tracks where the trestle crossed over Lancasane Creek. I think everyone drowned." All the telephone and telegraph lines were washed away between Jeffersonville and Charleston, so there was no way to get more information without going there. Bill jumped into his truck and headed up the Utica Pike toward Charleston, 12 miles north of Jeffersonville. Lancasage Creek stopped him. It backed up for miles, overflowing its banks, turning cornfields into swamps and submerging miles of highway. Bill sped back to Jeffersonville, loaded his boat, filled the gas tank, and returned to where the Utica Pike and the train tracks disappeared underwater. The sleet had turned to hail and was bouncing off the floor of his boat as Bill slid the hull into the water. He tried to follow those underwater train tracks and did pretty well for a mile, but the closer he got to the center of the creek, the stronger the current fought against him, until finally it pulled him completely off course. Soon he was hopelessly lost in a maze of swampy cornfields set between patches of woodlands. It became too dangerous to either go ahead or back. As much as it pained his heart to do it, Bill knew he would have to wait out the storm. He beached his boat on a small island, built a lean-to out of tree limbs, and started a fire. Then he sat down to wait and to worry.